grand jury transcripts related to the New York sex trafficking case against Jeffrey Epstein will not be released for now. That is the ruling Wednesday from the federal judge who oversaw the case.
Yeah, Justice Department officials sought to unseal the transcripts. It's unclear whether they will appeal the judge's decision, which comes after another judge rejected the release of transcripts related to Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell's case.
However, new files related to Jeffrey Epstein will soon be turned over to Congress. A House committee has subpoenaed the DOJ for documents already in its possession.
Our chief legal analyst, Khalif Rhodes, joins us now to talk about the case. Khalif, in terms of transparency, because that's what everybody wants, the House Oversight Committee will receive redacted files. They'll look through them and then make further redactions, and then the public will get what they deem necessary. The question is, how much will we actually learn from this when everything's all said and done?
I'm not sure how much we'll learn, but what I can tell you is that redaction process is important. You have a lot of victims in there, specifically individuals that committed suicide based on this incident that occurred to them, incidents, I should say. And so they want to ensure that those folks that were hurt, that were harmed, that families were hurt, that were harmed, that still are grieving with this situation, aren't further, traumatized by the situation. I think once all the redactions are in, you'll still be able to see who the key players were, the things that were happening. That's what will occur. I just don't, because we don't know what's there, and they're releasing it in these phases or tranches of documents. I'd like to say that it gives folks some closure. I'd like to say that it gives us a baseline of what that world looked like. But I mean, the ultimate best way of getting to know what it looked like in that way was getting Maxwell's testimony. I think that would have been the cleaner, better approach. But these files are documents that they've had for a number of years. Now we'll just get an opportunity to see it once another set of elected officials get their chance to see it first.
Khalif, how important is it when you have something as sensitive as what could be in these documents to involve the victims? And I guess what legal protections do victims have? Do they have any say before something like this could come out?
I don't think they have say. I think this is something that's up to the prosecutorial agencies, and then it would be up to the courts to be able to stop or delay that. Yeah, they can file some type of injunction, and the court would be able to hear that. But just without court intervention, the normal person that's a victim wouldn't have any say. Now, setting that aside, I understand that anyone in those prosecutorial positions will ensure that they speak to the victim, because what you don't want to do is, as I mentioned in the beginning, re-traumatize, but then you also don't want to have that public perception that you're insensitive to victims that have went through something traumatic like this. I mean, this portion is the part that I think is helpful. That grand jury testimony would have also been helpful, but jumping over that hurdle would have been extremely insurmountable. You're talking about secrecy, that privacy, that is the core foundation of the court having the grand jury process. So to overcome that, judges can do it, but it has to be narrowly tailored. The circumstances have to be extremely specific. And so you couldn't get both. Getting the grand jury testimony and the full release of these documents would have been great. Getting Maxwell's would have been a home run. But I think getting something is better than nothing. Now we'll have to see. Overly redacted, probably. But I think helpful, maybe.
Okay, it's a maybe, and I understand the redaction of victims' names. My concern is names like Trump, names like Clinton being involved in these. When it comes to these House oversight lawmakers, when they see a name like Clinton or Trump, there is personal privacy laws protecting them. But how do you decide when it's in the public interest to redact or not redact a name when they're possibly a former president or current president? Yeah,
I don't think they have a duty to do that. I think it stops at the victims. Anything outside of a victim, there's no duty to protect those individuals. Now, there may be some national security concerns that the White House would raise in terms of connecting the president to this. There may be some political frustrations connected with either side, name being associated with it as well. But I don't think there are any legal protections to stop a person that has a connection with a person such as Epstein or Maxwell, both individuals that were convicted of serious crimes, both individuals that preyed on children, the individuals that are supposed to be protected in our society. And so if your name is connected to them on some list where you had an association, and not just by knowing but participated in these type of activities, then yeah, I think the public has a duty to know that, and there's no legal protections to stop that. This isn't like they're releasing this individual social security number. They're not releasing their bank account information. They're just connecting their name, and your name doesn't have that expectation to privacy like some other things would.
speaking of names, the names involved in this case are huge. It's been all over, right? Global headlines. Do you think future sex trafficking cases are being shaped at all by what's going on, or is this a one-off because of how popular this is?
I think it's a little bit of both in that situation. I think where we're at right now with technology and with our society, extreme cancel culture, with the number of folks that have been even connected with any type of scandal, entire careers have been destroyed. And so folks, I think, are more cognizant of where they put themselves and what positions they put themselves in. Do I think these types of things are still occurring on a large scheme basis? I do. But I think most of the stuff that we're seeing now is from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, where now there's a reckoning that's coming behind what already occurred. I think the scandals that are occurring right now, where there are folks that are being trafficked in or, in these sexual positions that folks with positions of power have placed them, I think that we won't see those outcomes like something swift and broad sweeping like this ever again, just because the timing. There was no social media when they were doing these types of things. Text messages and cell phone data was kind of newer for folks during that era. And because of that, I think the access to getting all that information is now easier. And I think folks are now more cognizant of what's happening around them.
A different time indeed. All right, our Chief Legal Analyst, Khalif Rhodes, weighing in on that.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.